All right, some general features for mandibular molars. They have 4 to 5 major cusps. There's going to be 2 lingual for sure. So like for instance on this first mandibular molar, it has 2 lingual cusps. And then it has 3 over here on this side, on the buccal side. This one's technically called the distal cusp, and then this one's the distal buccal cusp. But we'll get more into that later. So in comparison to the maxillary one, first molar, where their buccal lingual dimension was going to be wider, in this case it's going to be the mesial distal aspect that's wider. And the mandibular molars are always going to have these 2 roots unless it's fused on that 3rd molar. Let's see, so for the first mandibular molar, there's going to be those 3 cusps on the buccal side and 2 cusps on the lingual side. There's going to be the mesial buccal cusp, the distal buccal cusp, and the distal cusp. The distal cusp is going to be the smallest, and it's also the sharpest. And then another feature about this tooth is that the root trunks tend to be a little bit longer on the first compared to the second. The roots, the first mandibular molar is going to have more divergent roots and more concavities and features on the mesial trunk. Moreover, if there's any variation in these root features, it's going to be on the mesial side. Sometimes this mesial root will diverge into a buccal side and a lingual side. Okay. For the second mandibular molar, there's always going to be 4 cusps. It's going to be the mesial buccal, the distal buccal, and then the mesial lingual and the distal lingual. It has more of a cross shape on the occlusal surface. It has a very distinct central groove, a central pit, and the marginal ridges are going to be more in a square or rectangular shape. The furcation is going to be closer to the CEJ, so there's less of a root trunk here. The roots are most likely going to be less divergent, and most of the time we end up seeing a lot of delaceration on these roots. That's where the roots not only come in and come in towards the middle, but sometimes they'll kick out to the side again. The mesial root is also going to have a little bit more variation, but it's less likely on the second mandibular molar compared to the first mandibular molar. And that's about it with the mandibular one right here. Okay, and then the third mandibular molar, you can tell it's going to be much smaller. It kind of decreases in size as we go more posterior in the mouth, but it also tends to have 4 roots, 4 cusps, and they're going to look pretty even altogether. And then the root feature here is that typically you'll see they'll all have fused roots. And I did want to show you one other thing with mandibular molars, and that is in comparison to primary teeth. The second molar for the primary dentition is nearly identical to the permanent first molar. And in the eruption phases, since this is your 6-year molar, it comes right next to this molar. So they'll have these 2 molars for a good 6 years of their lives, from age 6 to age 12 essentially, when these start shedding. Okay, so remember that it's the second primary mandibular molar looks like the first permanent mandibular molar. okay? And then another just quick little thing, the first maxillary primary molar is going to be the one that's like the most unique out of all the teeth. This one doesn't really have a tooth that it looks like in the mouth or of a primary dentition or in the permanent succedaneous teeth. So it's wholly unique. It has a more prominent buccal ridge. It has a very short root trunk. You see how deep these furcations go? And that's a lot of the times when you see these teeth shed, all these roots are resorbed into the bone, and all you see is this crown. Anyway, that's it for mandibular molars.